I'm Bernie. I'm a researcher with the Institute for Governance and Policy in Singapore. So the other two groups were very, very methodical. I'm going to tell you some vignettes and stories. So the first has to do with how we, so our theme was territory is imagination, and we thought it could also be conceived and rephrased as imagination is the territory, right? And so I'm going to tell you three vignettes. One is how classical Southeast Asian kingdoms have imagined sovereignty. It wasn't about territory, right? Because territory can be won or lost as the monsoon seasons came and went. And in fact, till today, you find that lots of military expeditions tend to be organized in the dry season, whereas lots of rebellions tend to occur in the wet season, right? When you have a society throughout archipelagic Southeast Asia where territory is hard to conquer and hard to traverse, we're talking jungles, right, tropical jungles, it's people that's important, right? And sovereignty is therefore conceived in terms of how many people you can control and how much resources you can extract from your people. Now you can contrast that to what happens today, right? Indonesia is the home of the Majapahit and Srivijayan empires, which are all about people. And yet in modern day Indonesia, we have in the Indonesian state carrying out massively destructive wars in Aceh in Indonesia that have destroyed tons of people to hold on to territory, right? So what happened? There is a reimagination of sovereignty that has occurred over the past 200 years in my region of the world, right? This is the second vignette. As many of you know, I come from Singapore, which is a country that's 25 miles by 14 miles across, right? That's 5.5 million people in 700 square kilometers. That's dense, right? We have the densest roads in the world. So where do we get our food from? Where do we manufacture? And where do we go on holiday? Where do we live? Well, the answer is in part the following. The Indonesian island of Bulan hosts a lot of farms that feed Singaporeans, right? The Indonesian island of Batam is Indonesian, but there are many Singaporean factories in Batam. And similarly, the Indonesian island of Bintan is, the sovereignty belongs to Indonesia, but Singapore currency is used in Bintan in resorts that are run and managed by Singaporeans. A fourth example is Johor, which is our neighbor to the north. It's Malaysian territory. We were in fact carved out from Johor in the early 19th century, but there are many, many apartments and condos there that are owned by Singaporeans. Fifth example, the Port of Singapore Authority is the managing authority of Singapore, but it also runs many, many, many ports around the world. Singtel is a Singaporean company, but it runs many, many, many telecommunications companies around the world. There's a second way in which we can challenge the idea of territory. The third one is actually an example from your own country, the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act of Singapore, right? Now, some of you who have paid attention to the New York Times would have realized that some time ago, Siemens, which is a German company, was brought to trial under the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act and was made to pay billions of dollars in fines. The crime that Siemens made was that a Siemens employee who was not American paid bribes to a foreign government. So the question you might ask is, why is a foreign national working for a foreign company committing crimes in a foreign country being brought to trial under American courts? Why is that? And the reason is because the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act extends its jurisdiction to any company around the world that trades shares on a US stock exchange. So the legal subject here is not people, it's not companies, it's not territory, it's a financial instrument, which is the stock exchange, or your stocks. Which therefore leads us to this flip side of the question, right? Which is that the territory is imagination. We face so many problems in the world today that emerge from territory, right? Resource challenges, resource sharings, boundary disputes, undocumented immigrants, and nomadic peoples, right? The petrification of state borders is particularly problematic for peoples who are nomadic. So what do? And my group decided that what we really, really need is, I have 1 minute more, a massive reimagination, right? We need to unleash the power of individuals to imagine alternative futures. And the answer therein lies not in giving power to individuals, it actually lies in giving power to communities. Why? Because it is when you empower communities that you empower individuals. If you think about it in your own societies, in America that is, one of the most disempowered individuals are undocumented immigrants. They lack access to healthcare, they lack access to political rights. Why? Not because they're individuals, but because they do not belong. It is in belonging that you actually enhance the individual, right? And so we think, therefore, that in order to build the future and unleash the ability of individuals to imagine, we actually need to enhance their ability to be communities. I have actually a little bit more, but I think I'll skip over the ideas that community involves diversity as well as the ability to communicate despite that diversity. But I would like to end with the idea that I don't think that this is actually a new idea, right? I think innovation is in part renovation. I think the ancients actually had the same idea. If you think about the parable of the 5 loaves and the 2 fish, right? Which is a story that Christians in this community would be very familiar with, right? You have a massive number of people who didn't know each other, and they were all hungry. And some guy comes up with 5 loaves and 2 fish, and the magic of Jesus transforms it, right? What the miracle is not the transformation of 5 loaves and 2 fish into food for a crowd. It's really through the act of giving and the magic of love that you transform a crowd into a community. And I think that is what we actually want to talk about, right? Unleashing the ability to imagine by forming and fostering community. So yeah.